Welcome back to the Illicit Feminine. I am very excited for today's conversation. It is with reverence and deep honor that I am speaking today about a wound that many of us know. We may not talk about it. We may have learned to ignore it, to avoid it, to pretend that everything is okay. But it is a thread that runs through many of our lives, whether we acknowledge it or not, and that is the sacred mother-daughter wound. Now, I need to preface this with saying that I am all about energetic work. I believe everything is vibrational. I believe everything is energy. So when I'm talking about the sacred mother-daughter wound, I am not doing it from a place of release staying in our trauma or perpetuating a wound. It's more of naming a thread. I said it earlier, a sacred thread that runs through generations. It runs through lineage. It runs through the people that are living with us here on this lifetime. And it is a bond. It is an energy. It is an experience that every mother-daughter lives to some extent. Mother, daughter, grandmother, great-grandmother, the line goes down and the line moves forward. The reason I believe that this conversation is so important, the number one reason, is that my entire life was consumed with what has transformed now, but what was once a mother-daughter wound. I always knew it, although I didn't know how to name it. They say what is personal is universal. And I have come to very much deeply in my heart connect with what was my story, what is now my story. I desire to share that with others who may have a desire to heal their story, to release what is no longer serving them. For those who are wanting to do the work, I have a heart for this topic. I have a heart for it because I watched pain and the anguish that went on between my mom and her mom until there was healing. I know the anguish that my grandmother felt, not between her mother and her so much, but my grandmother had to leave her mother, and there was a wound that was created there. So our wounds between the mother and daughter don't have to be traumatic in a sense of anger, rage, and energy of loss. It can be feeling of abandonment. It can be adoption, right? There's different wounds, leaving, loss, adoption that may occur that aren't necessarily based in anger or dysfunction or fighting or resentment. So this is really a space to honor and acknowledge the full spectrum of the experience of the mother and the daughter. Where to start? I have a program that I've been launching this month. You may have been reading about it if you received my emails. If not, I think you can subscribe in my show notes. I would love that. It has been a series that I've named Healing the Ancestral Feminine. It is a beautiful series, and I am so honored to have this small group of women that I am leading through different meditations and practices and somatic releases. It's short, right? 4 weeks is a very short time, and it's really just a taster for something I'm launching in the fall. But it's also to hear other women's stories around their mothers, what they've experienced, what their journeys have been, what has hurt them, what roles they feel that they had to play. I don't know that these conversations are being had to the extent that I believe they need to be. I know there's a thought that we don't need to look back. We can just really move forward. And I 100% adhere to that. And I believe looking back is a starting point. And when we do the work, when we look back into the things we've kept in shadow, then we are able to understand. And if you're like me, I really want to understand. It's helpful for me. It's how I'm wired. I won't apologize for it. I realize that's not how everybody is wired, and that's not what everybody needs. For me, I need to understand. And also, I have a great interest in my ancestral lineage. on both my paternal and my maternal side. I don't know as much about my ancestral lineage on my father's side so much, but I do know more on my mother's side. So I have this huge interest in it. So when we're looking at the mother-daughter wound, it goes from 3 levels. So we have the emotional part, which is a lot of what we learned as children of how to survive, right? As children, we're so close to the divine. Like we're so close to that place that we came from of just pure positive love energy, of just connection with God. And like we know what love feels like. So when we come into our human experience and we are met with human emotions, right? Being a mom is challenging. I find it and found it. Found myself tired. I found myself cranky. I found myself irritable. I found myself depleted. And when I was in that state, I wasn't my best self. At that point, I had no idea how to set boundaries and really give myself what I needed. I didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't know how to even listen to myself at this point, which was 15 years ago. My point of this is that as young children, we're met with the emotions and feelings of adults around us who are tired, who are doing the best that they can. And yet it may not always come off as the most loving experience to us. And so we learn coping mechanisms to balance the situation, especially if you're an empath, which is somebody who takes on feeling the emotions of others. And at that point, you don't know how to like keep your energetic boundaries up. It's really important if you feel like you are an empath that you learn how not to take on what is other people's, that what is yours. And you can use your empathic abilities in a really boundaried way. But as kids, a lot of us who are highly sensitive don't know how to do that. We take on other people's emotions and we learn what we need to do to have it be the least chaotic, least dysfunctional situation that it can be. So we learn how to stay small. We learn how to be good. We learn how not to feel too much, how not to want too much, how not to need too much, how to stay quiet. So there's the emotional aspect of the sacred mother-daughter wound. Then we go a level deeper and we have the ancestral things that are passed on. Depending on how your mother or your mother figure was raised, then those patterns, behaviors, thoughts, experiences are passed on from her mother to her. She takes on those beliefs, patterns, emotions. And if she's not consciously doing her work, she's passing that down to her children, right? And then the children, us, are then passing it down to our children. So there comes a lineage piece of it, right? Like pain, scarcity, lack, abuse, addiction, it can be passed on in those ways. So you have the ancestral piece. Then you have the human collective, like you have the even larger piece of that. And that is the disconnection from source, the disconnection from God, the disconnection from the self. So there is the belief that we're separate, that we are separate from what created us. We're separate from God. And so there's that bigger existential piece that as humans, we believe, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, until we understand again, till we remember that we are in deep connection with God always. We don't need to look outside of ourselves for what it is we need. Everything is within us. Our connection with source energy, God, whatever your higher power is, the ultimate important thing in your life. And when we believe that we are separated, which I did for a very long time, even though I also thought I didn't believe that, like I can see that I absolutely did. That's where the disconnection comes. And then that's where we feel hurt. We feel resentment. So it goes from like the emotional piece to the ancestral piece to the spiritual. So just a little bit into my own story. My mom passed, it'll be 5 years ago in August, which I cannot believe. And I now have this beautiful relationship with my mom. Of course, she's dead, right? So you're like, that doesn't make sense because how can you have a relationship with somebody who's passed? But I don't believe we're ever dead. I just believe we're evolving and my mom has transitioned. You can create whatever you want whenever you want it. So the healing that was necessary for myself after my mom died, because we never really quite got to it while she was alive. And when she did transition and she became just that pure love, I was then able to see her in a different light. I was able to do my work. I'm a certified conscious uncoupling coach. And as odd as it may sound, I was able to do the conscious uncoupling work with my relationship with my mother. And a lot of the conscious uncoupling work looks at how we show up. At this point, I had blamed my mom pretty much for everything. I didn't necessarily see my part in our relationship. I was so caught up in blaming and shaming and how hard it was for me. And it's not that it wasn't, okay? It's not that there wasn't a place to that. But as a 40-year-old woman, I was sick of that story. And I knew there wasn't even total truth in it because my mom had these amazing qualities. My mom had these amazing gifts she had passed on to me. She had this amazing love for my kids. My kids were my mom's world. And she was an incredible person. She was a woman who was strong in her beliefs, who was way beyond her time. My mom was immigrated from Manchester, England on a ship. They sailed a 3-week ship. My mom was 7. My aunt was 5. And there was a lot of hell that went on in that ship in that short period of time. And they had to grow pretty damn fast at 5 and 7, not to mention everything that happened with my grandmother, things I'm not going to get into today. And then landed in Los Angeles, California in the late 50s. She was one of the only white people in an all Japanese school. She lived in Gardena, California. That's how it was at the time. And learned how to survive. She lost her English accent very quickly because she was made fun of and didn't have a whole lot of love and support at home in the way that she probably needed it. Again, people only are doing the best that they can and know how to do at the time. She came from a very physically and verbally abusive home with my grandfather, who was also very wounded as a child, verbally and physically abused. And so that was passed on and was raped at a young age, was sexually abused at a young age, was physically abused at a young age. And this is my mom. And these things affected her. Obviously, I also believe that my mom suffered from depression and anxiety, whether that was a chemical imbalance or whether that was given her situation. It doesn't really matter. I think it developed into personality disorders and my mom had a really rough time. And it was like two edges of the sword, two sides of the sword, because she also was true to herself. My mom hitchhiked around Europe. My mom left home and went back to Manchester. My mom went around South America. My mom was not a conformist. My mom was like a fuck you to authority. She was her own person. She fought for the underdog. My mom marched, and her best friend was a Black woman in high school, and she marched in Martin Luther King rallies, and she met with the Black Panthers with her best friend. My mom lived this outrageous life, and she was growing up in LA. When I was able to step outside of my own story of the different things that had gone down with my mother and I, because there was so many of them, I was able to see her as a woman. I was able to see her in her pain. I was able to see her from a different perspective. Now, granted, I was not able to do this until she passed. So I don't know what your story is, right? I don't know how it is to heal while the woman is alive. I tried very hard, and we just butted heads. And at the end, my mom died basically in a place where I felt she hated me. And I didn't know what to do with that because I had set up 40 years of my life around this woman. After she passed, I was seeing an amazing coach and mentor. Her name's Debbie Holcomb. I will be forever grateful. And she said to me, when was the last time that you made a decision that was purely on your own? Like that you didn't think about anybody else? Now, don't get me wrong. I decide what I'm going to eat. I decide what I'm going to wear. But the truth is, I'd always had my mom in the back of my head. Was she going to be angry? How was this going to affect her? How was this going to affect me then in trying to handle the effect of her reaction and different things like that. So like when it was really coming to big things, because this is really what the question was about, I hadn't. I even like when my mom told me that it was time for me to have kids, like I was waiting too long, I fought her. And I was like, I guess it is. I guess it's time to have kids. Like I didn't understand how to totally think for myself. She passed, it started this whole new journey of me meeting myself, me understanding who I was without my mom. Now, I've shared more about my mother-daughter story on my previous podcasts in within the sacred journey, and I'll be sharing more, but that's just a little bit into the cleanse of my healing piece with my mom. Going back to our experiences within the sacred mother-daughter wound, the group that I've been doing has been really beautiful, and some of the key things that have been helpful within it from the women and just what I'm intuitively gathering is looking at the roles we've inherited. We talked about as children, we learn how to, we're like great strategists, right? Like we learn how to assess the situation and like how we're best going to go around it, especially if we're growing up in like emotional chaos and complete dysfunction. You're going to try what you need to do to keep yourself safe. So whether that's lie, whether that's cheat, whether that's steal, whether that's pretend, whether that's avoid, and that may not be logically sound. Like that might not seem right to people who maybe grew up differently or maybe grew up like in a strict household where those things were looked down upon or anything like that. If you grew up in emotional dysfunction and you grew up in chaos and you're a highly sensitive person, you are going to do what you had to do to feel safe and whatever kind of love that you can feel. So we can go into the caretaker role. Now, you may relate to all these roles. I certainly did. The caretaker role is always very vigilant about what mood the mother is in. Is she sad? Is she happy? Is she angry? What can I say? Because if she's happy, then maybe I can talk about this. But if she's sad, I know not to talk about that. And maybe I should get her a pillow, or maybe I should get her some aspirin, or what can I do more of? And then there's the peacekeeper. So the peacekeeper is the part that is going to make sure that there is peace. Whatever can be done to keep the mother peaceful and happy is what we are going to try and do. The peacekeeper can show up within siblings. The peacekeeper can show up within the parents. The peacekeeper really just wants to try and have things be calm and not chaotic. So there's a lot of negotiating, trying to figure out what is wanted so that then the other person isn't going to have an adverse reaction. There's a lot of understanding that comes within a peacekeeper. And then there's the role of the ghost. These are just the three kind of archetypes we're going to talk about today. It goes into, there's so many more archetypes that show up within our childhood family dynamics as well as we carry them on to adulthood. An archetype is really just like a symbol for a repeated pattern of being and repeated behaviors and repeated emotions. So then we have the ghost, and the ghost is, this can show up like in abusive households. This can show up in households that may not necessarily be abusive, but have a lot of anger. Like a ghost learns to hide in the shadows, right? The ghost doesn't want to be noticed, doesn't want to be recognized, doesn't want to call attention to itself because it's not safe. So you learn to hide, you learn to stay small, you learn to not have needs, you learn not to bring attention to yourself. All of these archetypes can learn not to have needs. All of these archetypes really put others before themselves in order to create some sort of safety or to feel some sort of love. Then there's the pieces that we learn as children that our emotions aren't safe to feel. I had a belief for a very long time, and a belief is just a thought that we think over and over. But it's also, when it comes from childhood, it's generally a thought that helped keep us safe. So it's like our wounded part, or what I like to call our survivor part, that is, hey, this keeps us safe, so let's keep on doing it. And then like it follows us into adulthood if we aren't working on it. And sometimes it's so subconscious, we're not even realizing it. I remember when I was young, I'm a very introverted person for most of my care, like of my character, of my personality. I am extrovert in certain ways also, but in order to be in that extrovert energy, I require a lot of alone time, like a lot of solitude, a lot of independence. And as a child, I spent so much time, like I was my mom's person, everything. So I felt like I was at her beck and call. And so if I would sneak off, I did a lot of hiding. I did a lot of lying. I did a lot of sneaking because if I wanted time on my own, I had to hide it because I learned that me having the desire of wanting to be on my own would make her angry. What was wrong with me? Why didn't I want to be with her? Why was I not doing what she wanted me to be doing? I also learned that like I could get sick, right? Sick. So I would lie that I was sick in order to have some time on my own. My mom didn't love illness. So that would be a surefire way that I could have some alone time. And so I learned another example was I was really close with my aunt and later with my godmother. But it was really the relationship that I had with my aunt that my mom was really pissed at. She was very jealous. And as a little girl, like I would express this joy and this happiness of being with my aunt. And oh my God, the wrath that would come down from my mom on that it was intolerable. So I was confused, right? Because it was my mom's sister and she loved her. And normally that would be a relationship that like a mother would nurture, right? I didn't know that at the time, but like somehow in my little mind, that was what I expected. And so I was very confused. So I couldn't understand how me wanting to spend time with my aunt made my mom so angry, but it hurt her. It was the same thing with my stepfather. I enjoyed spending time with this and that hurt my mom. So I learned that what I desired hurts other people. And so I people pleased. I like shut down my desires in order to try not to hurt others. Now they came out sideways and I ended up fucking hurting others more than I ever intended because I didn't know how to feel my own emotions. I didn't believe my own emotions were safe and that I could actually follow those. Honestly, probably until 5 years ago did I actually move that from my head to my heart, where I started doing that and still working on that because that was so ingrained in me that my emotions, my fear, like what my intuition is telling me wasn't safe. Like I had to numb that down. So we're taught that the other piece that emotions aren't safe to feel. They absolutely are. Our emotions are our guidance system. Our emotions, they're not us. It's not that our emotions are who we are, but our emotions are indicators of where we are in our journey, where we are in our thinking, where we are in our feelings. More on that in other episodes, but my point is that our emotions are absolutely safe to feel. They're necessary for us to feel. And then there's this beautiful piece of meeting with our inner child, like that part of us that was, its only intent was to help us survive and to thrive in our own little way. That was the other piece. Like my inner child knew how to thrive. She knew like what pleasure was. She knew what joy was. And I never quite lost that. I don't think I didn't become completely disconnected from my inner child. I ignored her and I avoided her. And the older I got, I definitely buried her. And then when I started to do my own emotional growth work, I began meeting with her. And I think when other women that I work with really begin paying attention to their inner child, they understand this is our opportunity where we get to remother that little one, where we get to give ourselves what we needed from our parent when we were young. And this is really where we heal things on an ancestral level. We heal things on that spiritual collective level. When we connect with the divine, and then we go within ourselves and we meet with our inner child on such a deep spiritual level, frequency, healing can take place that we didn't even understand. And I think that is what I know. That is the experience that I had after my mom died and continue to have because I still get angry. I still get pissed. I still have things that I have to like work on. And then I come into this connection with God to open my heart to see this in a different way, both my hurt. It's this duality of holding both my hurt and my mother's hurt and like letting the love transform that. And that can sound really woo or really like off the wall because it's not something that can be described in words. It's actually like you have to feel it, like you have to allow it and you have to embody it. And so that's the remothering. That's the sacred healing of remothering ourselves. And what it is, we don't have to look outside of ourselves for that. We allow the healing to come through us. So these are really the pieces, the starting pieces of healing the ancestral feminine that are what's coming up with for me to share with you today. I think I'll be doing more sacred mother wound podcasts when they arise and when I feel called to, but these are the pieces that I want to leave with you. And I think that I'm just looking at my notes, making sure I'm covering everything that I want, because there's so much more to say. There's so much more sacred space to hold for this conversation. And this isn't the last by any means. So what I want to ask you, when you're doing your sacred mother wound work, we've talked about like looking at it on the different levels of emotional, ancestral, and spiritual. We've talked about what roles did you feel that you had to take on, the caretaker, the peacekeeper, the ghost. We've talked about understanding that you get to reparent yourself. And all of these, believe me, I don't know how long this is, but this is like a 30-minute podcast. This takes a lot. These practices go a lot deeper. And there's several good books out there on this. I don't know that there's enough. And this is one of the reasons I really want to step into this conversation, because I believe there's so much more awareness that needs to be held. So in that, for what we covered today, a question you can ask yourself, what part of your voice sounds like hers? What are the things you say to yourself that you heard her say to you? Like they may not even be yours. They just may be her wounds, her hurts, her fear, her lack, her beliefs that may not even have even been hers. Like start to trace where this goes back. If your mother's alive and your grandmother's alive, these are amazing conversations to have if they're open to them. Not amazing conversations to have if you think that's going to stir up any sort of emotion that you're not looking to have. If you have the luxury of having this information, like with living people, we're going to having these conversations. But ask yourself, what part of her voice is still in you? That's an indication of where you can start the healing. And what would your soul say? What would your soul, your heart, your little one, the essence of who God created you to be, what would she say that the wounded part of you didn't feel safe to say before? What are some truths that you've been hiding in the shadow so you felt safe or loved or validated or whatever it was that you were looking for externally? Because you get to say them now. I'm not even saying that you say them to somebody. Like you get to say them to yourself. You get to acknowledge them. It might not even feel safe to say them out loud, but you get to acknowledge them. What are some of the truths that you understand you don't have to keep in shadow anymore, because you now can keep yourself safe, even if it's just a conversation within you? Love this. I love this conversation. I can't wait until I'm led to what the next part of this needs to be in conversation. But thank you. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. And until next time, stay sacred and stay illicit. I'll see you soon.